In Victorian England, as well as the US, homosexuality was considered immoral and illegal, leading to clandestine encounters. Where lesbianism was not officially acknowledged as a crime, male homosexual acts were criminalized gross indecency according to the law, leading to arrests and prosecutions for such activities, even in private, although few actually came to trial, and those that did had far fewer conviction rates than other crimes. Most suspects were either caught having sex in public or were targets of a politically motivated prosecution. Many of them were allowed to leave the country before any court appearance and any unwanted publicity. Punishments could range from imprisonment to hard labour, and the severity of these penalties sometimes depended on the individual's social standing. Such acts were often viewed as effeminate and unnatural, with the expectation that men should be masculine, which played a significant role in shaping societal attitudes. Public opinion was complex and understood that same-sex relationships were common, yet were not openly discussed in polite society. While male homosexuality was criminalized, lesbianism was not explicitly addressed legally in the same way. It was considered that female relationships were sometimes tolerated or even encouraged as part of a woman's preparation for marriage. In America, for instance, so-called Boston marriages were one of the few ways for women to live independently from men and cohabit together in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The term was coined to describe a long-term committed relationship between two unmarried women, involving anything from friendship, professional partnerships, or lesbian romances. There is a long record of it in England, America, and other European countries. The upper class, particularly the aristocracy, also often displayed a more tolerant attitude towards extramarital affairs, including same-sex relationships, just as long as they did not create a public scandal. Things came into sharp focus in the late 1860s, with the celebrated scandal of Thomas Bolton and Frederick Park, who were Victorian cross-dressers. Both were homosexual men from upper-middle-class families, and both enjoyed wearing women's clothes, and both enjoyed performing in theatres, playing the women's roles when they did so. Both were very indiscreet when they cross-dressed in public, and came to the attention of the police. Ernest Bolton was born on the 18th of December 1847 in Tottenham in London. He was the older of two boys who survived past infancy. His parents were Thomas Boulton, a wine merchant, and his wife Mary. The Boltons had three other sons who died at a young age of tuberculosis. Ernest was a sickly baby, and his parents feared that he also had the illness. As a child, Boulton was often mistaken for a girl. From the age of 6, he began dressing up and acting like a female, often as a parlour-maid. He once dressed up and served his unknowing grandmother at the dinner table. As he grew up, he continued cross-dressing, a practice about which his parents were indulgent. When he was about 18, his father discussed a potential career in the professions, but Boulton said he wanted to work in the theatre. His father got his way, and in 1866, Boulton began work as a clerk at the Islington branch of the London and County Bank. He did not like working there, and his attendance was often sporadic. He resigned from his job after his employers had written to his father to question whether his son was suitable for the bank. Boulton was homosexual and was known to his friends as Stella, although sometimes also by the name of Miss Ernestine Edwards. In 1867, he was arrested with his friend Martin Cummings in the Haymarket, a known venue for prostitution, when they were wearing dresses and soliciting men for sex. No charges were brought. He was arrested again a few weeks later for the same offence, this time with a man called Campbell, a transvestite male prostitute who went on the sobriquet Lady Jane Grey. The two appeared at Marlborough Street Magistrates' Court, where they were both fined. Frederick Park was the third son and 12th child of Alexander Park, the Master of the Crown of Common Pleas, which was one of the superior courts of Westminster, and his wife Mary. His mother died before his 3rd birthday. He grew up in the family home in Wimpole Street, central London, where he was educated at home by his sisters and a governess. Park's eldest brother, Atherton, was killed while serving with the army in India. His other brother, Harry, was arrested about the age of 16, when Park was 11 or 12, for homosexual activity. Harry's Italian boyfriend had attempted to blackmail him over their affair, and when Harry refused to pay, reported him to the police. He vehemently denied the accusations at a magistrate's court, and the case was dismissed. Harry was open with his younger brother about his homosexuality. On the 1st of April 1862, 2 or 3 years after the court appearance, Harry was arrested for indecent assault on a police officer in Weymouth Mews in London. In court again, he was sentenced to a year's hard labour, and was then sent to Scotland by his father to avoid further scandal. Park's father decided the best profession for Frederick was to become a solicitor, and arranged for him to be articled to a firm in Chelmsford. There is no record of when Bolton and Park first met, but the two became close friends, with a joint love of the stage and of cross-dressing. They would go out in public dressed in either male or female clothing. They were not prostitutes, but sometimes asked their admirers for money. When the two appeared in public wearing female attire, many of those who saw them believed they were women, and they liked to be known as Stella and Fanny. In drag, they watched the 1869 Oxford and Cambridge boat race, went shopping in London's West End, ate at restaurants, and went to the theatre and music halls. When they went out in male attire, Bolton and Park would wear tight trousers and shirts open at the collar, and wearing makeup. This was perhaps more disturbing and offensive to passers-by than their cross-dressing. To store their clothes, cosmetics and other items, as well as the base from which they went out, the two rented a small flat at 13 Wakefield Street, off of Regent Square. In the late 1860s, the two were part of a theatre group that toured Britain, giving private performances. In addition to private houses, they appeared on stage in Chelmsford, Brentwood and Southend, as well as in Scarborough. They always took the female roles and dressed accordingly. In the theatre programmes, their names were listed as Bolton and Park, and audience members knew the parts were played by two men. In 1868, they were joined on tour by Lord Arthur Clinton, the Liberal Party member for Parliament for Newark, who performed in male roles in the entertainment. They played husband and wife on the stage, and shared an onstage kiss, and it raised no complaints from any of the audience or the local press. Clinton had been in a relationship with Bolton for about a year, and he called himself Clinton's wife, and had cards printed showing his name as Lady Arthur Clinton. Boulton and Park had been so flagrant in their behaviour that they came to the attention of the police, and the pair had been under surveillance for over a year. Cross-dressing was not illegal, as it was associated with the theatre, particularly pantomime. There was no association in the minds of the general public between cross-dressing and homosexuality. When arrests were made, it was under the charge of occasioning a breach of the peace. On the evening of the 28th of April 1870, Bolton and Park, both dressed as women, went to the Strand Theatre, where they had reserved a box, and they were accompanied by two friends, Hugh Mundell and Cecil Thomas, both of whom were wearing male clothes. When the group left the theatre, Bolton and Park were arrested. Thomas ran off, and Mundell accompanied the pair to the police station in Bow Street. As the police were unsure whether Bolton and Park were male or female, despite both stating they were men dressed as women as a bit of fun, they were ordered to undress, and did so in front of several policemen. The two men were kept in Bow Street overnight, and were kept company by Mundell, who had been arrested at the station for refusing to give his name and address. The following morning, Bolton and Park were taken across the road into Bow Street Magistrates' Court, both still wearing their dresses from the previous evening. Newspaper reports on their appearance included extensive descriptions of the pair's clothing and hairstyles. It was reported that when put in the dock, Bolton wore a cherry-coloured silk evening dress trimmed with white lace. His arms were bare, and he had on bracelets, and he wore a wig. Park's costume consisted of a dark green satin dress, low-necked, trimmed with black lace, and a shawl around his shoulders. His hair was flaxen and in curls, and he wore white gloves. A crowd of several hundred people had gathered to see the two make their way into court. Their arrest was too late to appear in the morning newspapers, and it is not known how the news had travelled so widely in such a short space of time. The courtroom was also packed full of spectators. The two men were charged that they did with each and one another feloniously commit the abominable crime of buggery. Further, that they did unlawfully conspire together, and with divers and other persons, feloniously to commit the said crimes. Further, that they did unlawfully conspire together, and with divers other persons, to induce and incite other persons feloniously with them to commit the said crime. And further, that they being men, did unlawfully conspire together, and with divers others, to disguise themselves as women, and to frequent places of public resort, so disguised, and to thereby openly and scandalously outrage public decency and corrupt public morals. The court heard from 4 policemen, one of whom had visited the Wakefield Street flat that morning, and showed the magistrate a series of photographs of Bolton and Park in male and female clothing. He told the court he had conducted surveillance on the two during the previous year. Another policeman stated he had been on surveillance duty at the Wakefield Street flat for the past fortnight, and had seen the late-night comings and goings of the two men. The magistrate remanded the accused in custody for 7 days. They left the court and returned to the neighbouring police cells, where the two men were subjected to intrusive physical examination without consent by Police Surgeon James Paul, the doctor who worked with the Bow Street Division of the Metropolitan Police, who made a number of his own conclusions about their homosexual activity. At a subsequent court appearance, both were held on remand for 2 months. To counter the evidence that was presented, the defence arranged for 6 doctors to physically examine Bolton and Park. They all concluded that there was no evidence of homosexual activity. The 2 men were held at Coldbath Fields Prison in Clerkenwell. When both of them appeared at Bow Street Magistrates' Court, a crowd of around 1,000 people were gathered outside to see them arrive, and the courtroom was full to capacity. Some of the crowd were disappointed to see them dressed in male clothes. When questioned, Maundell stated that he believed Boulton to be a woman, and made amorous advances to her accordingly. A list of items seized from the Wakefield Street flat was read out, and it included numerous items of women's clothing, ladies' shoes and boots, wigs, hairpieces, hairdressing equipment, and makeup. Bail was refused, and Bolton and Park were again put on remand. They were warned that there would be more attendances at the court. They both appeared 7 times by the end of May, and details of the evidence gathered by the police was included in the hearings. The investigation, under the control of Superintendent James Thompson, continued while the accused were on remand, and their findings were raised in court. Witnesses who came forward to the police included John Reeve, a manager at the Alhambra Theatre of Variety, and George Smith, the supervisor of Burlington Arcade. Both men reported that they had ejected Bolton from their respective premises on numerous occasions. Thompson travelled to Edinburgh and interviewed the landlady of Louis Hurt, a post office surveyor and friend with whom Bolton had stayed. Thompson tried to get the landlady to agree with the idea that Bolton and Hurt regularly shared a bed together. She told the detective that Bolton slept in a different room. Thompson removed photographs of Bolton and correspondence between the 2 men. Following the trail of letters, police also interviewed John Fiske, the American consul in Leith, and again removed photographs and correspondence. The pair were released from remand on the 11th of July 1870, having been held for over 2 months. The police investigation continued, and in addition to Bolton and Park, charges were brought against Clinton, Hurt, Fiske, and 3 others who were found to be connected: William Somerville, Martin Cumming, and C.F. Thomas. Somerville had accompanied Bolton and Park to a ball, and they had been in drag, and he had been in male clothing. He had also written letters to Bolton which the police had found, which were the basis of the charge against him. Thomas was an independently wealthy man, who was driven to meet his friends in his own carriage. He and Cumming would both join the others in public in women's clothing. Somerville, Cumming, and Thomas all absconded before the trial. Charges against Mundell were dropped, and he was listed as a witness for the prosecution. On the 18th of June, it was revealed that Clinton had died of scarlet fever. He made a deathbed denial against the accusations of sodomy, and dictated a note to his solicitor, which read, "Nothing can be laid to my charge other than the foolish continuation of the impersonation of theatrical characters, which arose from a simple frolic in which I permitted myself to become an actor." Initially it was thought that the case against the men would be held in the Old Bailey, but Bolton's counsel applied for the case to be moved to the Court of the Queen's Bench at Westminster Hall, a lower court and perhaps a less strict one. Amid a frenzy of public interest, the trial ran between the 9th and the 15th of May, 1871, before a special jury. Both defendants dressed in male clothing for their appearance, and both had grown facial hair in the year since their arrest. This left Boulton, Park, and 6 of their associates, some of whom had fled abroad and were tried in their absence, charged with conspiring and inciting persons to commit an unnatural offence. In other words, that they had been dressing as women in order to solicit men for sex. The act of men dressing as women was, in itself, not a crime, and the evidence brought by the prosecution failed to demonstrate that any conspiracy had taken place. With no physical evidence that homosexual acts had taken place, and no witnesses against any of the accused, the prosecution said that the lifestyles of the men, their public displays of transvestitism, were proof of homosexual activity. The defence stated that Bolton and Park's actions were not criminal, but feckless and immature. Their theatrical background playing women's roles was used as a defence and to explain their possession of such clothing. The witnesses produced by the prosecution proved disastrous for their case, as many told the court they had seen no evidence of improper behaviour. Mundell recounted that Boulton and Park had told him several times, verbally and in correspondence, that they were men in drag, but he had disbelieved them. He said that Boulton had rebuffed physical advances, rather than encouraging them. Smith, the supervisor of Burlington Arcade, had a lot to say about his dismissal for accepting tips from female prostitutes to ply their trade. He told the court that he had been getting up evidence for the police in this little affair, as he put it, and that he had expected to be paid by the police for giving evidence. The prosecution presented and read out in court examples of the letters involving the accused men. The defence argued that these were shows of affection between the writers, with some of the language exaggerated by theatrical propensities, and not any evidence of a physical relationship. The judge's summing up was highly critical of the police investigation and the treatment of the men by the police surgeon. He also criticised the prosecution's case, and that the investigation in Scotland and charges against Fisk and Hurt were excessive. He pointed out that the police had no jurisdiction to act without a warrant in Scotland, and that the court had no authority to try people for an event that took place there, which was a matter for the Scottish courts. He doubted that the police had made a sufficiently strong case that proved homosexual activity had taken place. There was no doubt, the judge continued, that some of the accused had appeared in public in women's clothing, and suggested that such outrages of public decency should be addressed by future legislation that allowed sentences of 2 or 3 months' imprisonment, and in case of repetition of the offence, a little wholesome corporal discipline would be effective not only in such cases, but in all cases of outrage against public decency. After deliberating for 53 minutes, the jury found all 4 men not guilty on all counts, and all of the accused were freed. At the announcement, Boulton fainted. There was applause from the public gallery, cheers and cries of "Bravo!" The case had been fraught, with contested issues touching on gender, sexuality, social class and urban culture. On the 6th of June, the last remaining matter from the court cases was brought to a close. Bolton and Park had a remaining charge of appearing in public dressed as women, which was an offence against public morals and common decency. They met their barrister in his chambers, where they dropped their pleas of not guilty to accept being bound over for 2 years. The hearings and trial were widely reported in the national and local press across Britain, and most of the papers have provided extensive space for the coverage. The two men's private lives, and those of their known friends and associates, were scrutinised and publicised in lurid terms in the press, and appeared under sensational headlines. After the trial, Boulton returned to performing on the stage. From 1874, he spent some time in New York, performing under the name Ernest. He returned to Britain in 1877 and again toured the country. He died from a brain tumour on the 30th of September 1904 at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in London. Park also travelled to New York and appeared on stage under the name Fred Fenton, where he had some limited success in character parts and was a resident performer at the Fifth Avenue Theatre. He died in 1881, aged 34, probably of syphilis. The Crown's failure to secure the prosecution of Bolton and Park showed the difficulties in investigating private activities, particularly gay ones. During the hearings in May 1870, a newspaper reported that a witness said, "We shall come in drag," which means wearing women's costumes. The magistrate noted that this is the first time the meaning of the word drag has been given in evidence. The exchange is listed in the Oxford English Dictionary as the first known use of the term drag for cross-dressing.